What is going on, everybody? So this video is going to pick up from the last video. They should be in the same playlist, but by now we should have Droplet set up on DigitalOcean and a non-root user with sudo privileges that we can SSH to. So in this video, we're going to run through setting up a virtual environment, and then in the video after this one, we're going to set up Django with an Nginx web server and Gunicorn. This here is the guide that we will be following. But again, I'm making this walkthrough as not everyone likes to read, so you can get hands-on and follow along in this video. So let's jump right in. So now in our SSH directory, we should have our config file. And we are using the same SSH as root, but we do not want to be that user when we do these installs. So we are going to update this to Gary. And Control X to save, Y, enter. And let me open up Visual Studio Code, and we are going to connect to demo. And looks like that's taking a moment. And what I'm using here is an extension called Remote SSH from Microsoft. If you don't have that, you can just search over here in extensions, and then you'll get this nifty little greater than, less than, and that's going to look in your home directory in the .ssh directory for a config file, and then the hosts there will show up when you choose connect to host. I just have the one here, and then we can go ahead and open a folder, and we can just start in Gary's home directory. And once that opens, we can trust the authors. And Control and the tick mark, the key probably under your escape key, is going to open up a nice terminal down here for us. So back to the guide. So believe we updated last time, but just to make sure, always good practice when you are creating a new VM is just to run that. And that'll take just a moment. And now there's a few things we need to install. Python venv, which is going to be for creating our virtual environment. The Python dev, libqdev, that I believe is usually for building Python packages from binaries. And then PostgreSQL, PostgreSQL contrib, which we'll use as a backend database for Django, the Nginx web server, and curl, which is just a nice way to be able to pull data from the internet. So I'll Control-Shift-V, and I already copied this one and ran it, so let me get rid of that. All right, while that's going, we can look at our next step, and okay, that is going to be creating a database in Postgres that Django will eventually use. We can just grab that, and that's a Postgres command, so I need to wait for this to finish. Shouldn't take too long. go ahead and enter through that. That should be fine. All right, I'm going to Control L to clear that, give us some more room. Expand this up. And we want to create database. Just call that Django. Make sure I'm getting that syntax right. Probably important that we use that semicolon at the end to terminate the statement. That looks good. And I'm just going to copy that. And I'm just going to create a user. Again, this is a user in Postgres. So I'm going to call this Django user. And if you want a better password, you can set it here. I'm just going to leave that as password so I don't forget it. Okay. Let's see. And actually, you know what? I'm going to copy all of these. Nice nifty trick here. This was a file that we made yesterday, which is blank. But if we go ahead and double click, we can Control Shift L to get multi-line cursor. And we can just do Django user like that. Control A to select all, Control C to copy. And oh, I named him wrong. Well, you know what? We are going to call him Django user for now. If I was going to do this correctly, I would go back, destroy that user, recreate it, and then do this as Django user. But I don't feel like re-recording all of this at the moment. Maybe sometime in the future. Okay. And then we just need to grant privileges on the database to the user we just created. So this is going to be database Django. Oops. If I could type here. A little bit of a lag. Oh, it exited me out of Postgres there. Did not notice that. There we go. All right, and to get out of Postgres /Q, now let's set up our virtual environment. Okay. So we're going to make a directory, change into that directory, and make a virtual environment. Virtual environments are nice. Honestly, I don't really use them too much. Most of my stuff it's just personal projects, but it's kind of a way to isolate your package installs from the system Python. So especially on Linux, a lot of things are written in Python and say it has requests version 1.2, and you're working on something that wants request 2.4, and that's usually the way it works. There's a higher version that's new, that's in a nice shiny tool you want to work with, but there's some kind of large Python program already running on Linux Mint that's using an older version. Well, if you replace requests with the newer version, some of the functionality might have changed and you might break a lot of things. So when you install it and activate it, you're working with Python and it knows to look in the virtual environment and use those packages rather than going to your system Python. Hopefully I explained that well enough. Again, Control L, I'm just going to make a directory, and we can call that Django demo, and change into it, and this is going to create a directory that's going to hold all of the libraries that are going to be in our virtual environment. And I'm going to call this Django env. But before I do that, let me just go ahead and I'm going to copy that, and I just want to run an ls here to show that there's nothing in this directory. And then once that loads, we will see a new directory there called Django env. And so inside here, we can kind of look around, bin, include, lib64. What we want to do is source and bin, and there's a script called activate. There should be one called activate. Oh, I didn't give it. That looks right. env bin. Oh, I didn't type activate correctly. And now we see that Django env is running there. So anything we install, any Python packages we install now, if we come out of this virtual environment, if it's something that doesn't exist in the system Python, it's going to go, I don't know what you're talking about, it's not installed. And we can see the difference here. Now that I'm in the virtual environment, I can do Python, and that's there. Here we can start a new terminal, and that's not going to have the virtual environment, and it wants Python 3. The virtual environment is nice enough that it just lets us type Python. Okay, so that's enough of a detour, and let's go on to the next step. Okay. Oh, this is why we needed the Psycho PG2. Notice the dash binary. I mentioned that up above when we installed Python 3 dev, the libpq dev. Those are what's used for building from binaries, so that makes sense. And again, make sure you're doing this in your virtual environment. You'll see it in the parens here, and we'll just go with that. And while that's going, we can maybe look ahead what the next step is going to be. That's going to be actually starting the project. I'm actually going to save that for the next video, but here I just want to show I'm in my virtual environment. I'm going to do Python and import Django. If I am not in my virtual environment, I need to run Python 3 and import Django. And that module's not there because that is looking The system's probably looking in user bin. I don't recall exactly where that looks, but this is looking in the virtual environment directory. See if I can find it real quick. Maybe lib. And we see that we have, oh, not there, Django, and also that we installed Gunicorn. But that's it for this video. SSH, very powerful, especially when you combine it with config files and superpower it with VS Code. It's almost like you're developing locally, which is what they're going for, and it's a great skill tool to have, be familiar with. Also virtual environments, very useful. Again, I tend not to use them, but when I talk to people that all they do is Python coding for production software, they usually use virtual environments. So get familiar with that. There's plenty of tools out there that allow you to manage those. I'll try to remember and list them down in the comments, as well as a link to this nice Django install walkthrough from DigitalOcean. And that's it for this video, and I will see you in another one.